Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night to all of our friends who are joining us from around the world.
It's so exciting to see everybody coming back together again after getting together on Earth Day, to come back together on another international celebration of great work that young people are doing all across the planet on World Environment Day. Could not be more fitting.
World Environment Day. And we want to welcome all of our friends who have heard of Decarbonize and are interested in our program and are joining us through YouTube, or those who are here from, we have India, Turkey, Peru, Kenya. We have so many countries, Canada, of course, here in our Zoom room as well. But don't worry, if you're joining us from our Zoom, I know we have some of our Argentinian friends joining us on YouTube. If you're joining us from YouTube, you feel free to leave your comments. One of our friends is one of our friends from CGE here is on YouTube, and she'll be bringing those questions, those comments into the live meeting, so you too can participate in a live way. So welcome Decarbonize World Environment Day. So
yay!
Woohoo! Now we have some great guest speakers here today who are going to be talking about energy analytics and how we're really rolling this idea of not just making social climate action change and really feeling good about the action we're taking, but how do we quantify that? How do we take that to our school administrators, our school leaders, our city leaders, and say, these changes not only are making a social impact, making us feel like we're changing the world around us, but they are actually doing that in numbers and in dollars and in other ways, because sometimes that's the metric that works to convince people.
That's exactly it. A lot of times in schools, schools are famous for projects that kids are doing and teachers are doing and coming together around those type of actions. But sometimes we forget that these actions that we're doing can have more than just an educational impact and can have more than just a social impact. But as you say, Sarah, they can actually come to the point where we can measure it, and then we can share that, and we can inspire other people to take those kind of actions that make that quantifiable difference.
And I think there's no better day to talk about quantifying difference to the environment than World Environment Day. And so June 5th is designated by the United Nations as the day when people across the world participate in encouraging awareness and action to protect our environment while healing the planet. So we take this moment. We can't turn back time, but we can grow trees, we can green our cities, we can rewild our gardens and change our diets and clean our rivers and coastlines. We can make peace with nature. And so let's get to it. Let's do this. Awesome. So before we really dive into today, I wanted to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you from Treaty 6 territory. And in Canada, in Alberta, that's the traditional meeting grounds and gathering place and traveling route of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. So I'd like to also acknowledge all the Indigenous people from all the lands around the world that we are all on today. And while we meet on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of lands that we all call home. So we do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to improving relationships between First Nations and ourselves, and improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and cultures. So from coast to coast to coast across the world, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the First Nations peoples, the Inuit, Métis, that call this land home. And together, as Canadians and as citizens, global citizens, we must do more than just talk about reconciliation. We have to learn how to practice it in our everyday lives, within ourselves, within our families, within our schools and our communities, within our places of worship. We must remain committed to the ongoing work of establishing and maintaining respectful relationships. And we're doing that today. We're thinking about what does this mean? What does coming to peace with our environment mean? What does celebrating and really reinvesting and taking care of nature and the earth mean? And so welcome to everyone. So Decarbonize,
should Decarbonize 2021, absolutely.
We might share my screen here to really look again. I know some of you have heard the spiel of this amazing year that we have before us, but we're very excited. COP26, it was delayed last year. So we have a bit of a part A and a part B to our Decarbonize students. But COP26 will be in Scotland. It's co-hosted with Italy this year, and it's the UN Framework for Convention of Climate Change, UNFCCC. They have so many acronyms. Oh my goodness. But they will be coming together in November to really negotiate 5 years, well, technically 6, but we pretend like last year we lost to COVID, doesn't count. So 6 years since the Paris Agreement. And now, what's important about the Paris Agreement?
Well, the Paris Agreement was a time, one of those milestone times when the planet came together and we said, okay, we've got to do something. We need to take some firmer action. We need to make some commitments. And so in a very real way, the world made some commitments to how they were going to reduce the amount of carbon that was being emitted and how they were going to go about doing that. And so this is the day, this is the year in which we come together and we say, okay, what have we done? How have we done it? Are we doing as much as we say we are? And the world is on a journey, and so too are we. And so let's talk a little bit about that journey together. And Decarbonize is.
So Decarbonize is the world's largest synthesis of under 18 opinion on action, learning, and really engaging in environmental policies and practices in our countries. And so bringing us all together, we are amazing. Right now, 45 countries, and we have a lot of interest still to come over the summer. I think by the fall, we might even be up to 50 this year. So as the world prepares to for COP across the planet, we are mobilizing around continued climate change action. So why don't you talk about this timeline?
Excellent. So we got together and launched this year's project in April. So on Earth Day. And this is where we talked about the art projects that the students are going to be doing. We talked about the action projects that the students are going to be doing. When we find
survey.
Yes,
we have a
very
preview.
Important. The preview of the survey.
Yes, our friend Jessica, who's also from intern with CGE, she's been designing the survey hard at work, and it is ready for you guys to secretly pilot today. I'm going to put it in the chat. We're going to put it in the chat here. We're going to put it in the chat on the YouTube, and then you guys can be the pilot testers of this year's Global Youth Survey. So sorry to break in there.
No, please, and thank you for doing that. And then when we come to September, this is when we're going to launch our whole school projects. And so these are going to be class-based or school-based collaborative learning projects in which the students are going to be taking action in their school, in their communities, in their towns, in their countries, and they're going to be moving that forward. We're going to have another launch event right around that time in September, October, in which we get together and celebrate the immediate next steps that we're going to do. And then we start the bilateral journey. So this is where we're going to be connecting schools in Global North with schools in Global South. And we're going to find ways in which we can all work together and share those projects.
And then we're going to come together. We come together in the bilaterals, we come together in continentals, and then we'll come together in globals. And last year we did all of this virtually, and fingers crossed we might be able to do this in person this year. And so one representative from each of our nations will come together in Scotland and collaboratively write, locked in a basement or grueling hours, to create a paper, a manifesto of sorts that we'll take into the COP meeting and share with people there. There's a lot of interest in our project this year. I've been talking with many groups across the UN, but also with organizations who are really invested in having youth opinion on climate change brought to the UN and celebrated at the UN. We have a lot of interest from UNICEF all the way over to just organizations and corporate industries that want to change their practices and who are looking to youth as the future for the momentum. They call it like a license, a social license.
Social license.
You know, where if the students are pushing and youth are pushing, they're the ones who are going to be voting both with their votes, but also with their dollars. And so by you saying, this is important to me, it becomes important to them. And it gives them that room to make these changes.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about some of the changes that you're going to be doing. So right now we're at the point where we have a base level of action, right? So these are whole school community outreach projects. This is arts and this is surveys in which you're going out to youth across your schools, across your communities and across the nations, getting information, getting data that you can bring back. After that, we're going to be looking at refining this up and taking the numbers down a little bit. And this is where students are going to complete project-based learning activities on a dedicated virtual platform. This is where we're going to be building that community, one in between the other, on a bilateral manner, on a continental, and then on a global scale. And then finally, as Sarah said, we're going to come together, a small group of you, to synthesize the work that the tens of thousands of youth have represented through the surveys and art and class-based projects. And they're going to be presenting that work to the leaders of the planet at the UN conference in November.
Amazing. So we have lots of who are we? We're all over. This was a really nice diagram that was put together by our students in Brazil when they were presenting this paper to the director of mitigation just a few months ago. And so we're all over. We're across so many continents. We just don't have Antarctica. Those penguins refuse.
We tried to get the penguins.
Their little flappers
but I'll
work.
tell you honestly.
They just, we'll have to care for them. And so here's a nice little map. I always like to see it spread across. It shows just how diverse all of our team is. So, well, we wanted to give you a little bit of a sneak peek. Some of the things we're going to be doing, because it's not just activities, learning activities like boring, where you're, we want you to share. We want to hear your voices, both in terms of, well, maybe I'll jump. We have some art, of course, but we want to see posters. We have many people who want to participate because the working language is English on our project. Sometimes that keeps people away from participating. Maybe they only speak Portuguese, they only speak Swahili, whatever language barrier there might be. Well, we want to encourage you to share these templates with them. And maybe we create posters in English, but then you're creating them in Spanish as well and putting them up around your school, letting people know that you're involved in decarbonization. This is part of your voice. We'll be doing podcasts. So we're going to have short, sort of TikTok-like podcasts that we'll be putting together. We have the survey, of course, that I'm going to share here in a bit. And then we have our training around leadership training that we're going to talk about full on today. When we stop gabbing at you, we're going to turn it over to our guest speaker and our schools. We're going to talk about some of the action they're already doing. But the Commit to Act app is brand new as well. And it is being funded by a grant through the Canadian government. And they are helping us to engage you in a platform that lets you track, compare, challenge, quantify all of the action you're taking, not just around climate change, which is obviously one of the SDG goals, but also around others, because perhaps you're really interested in climate change, but you're interested in the aspects and the impacts on gender or hunger or poverty. And we want you to be able to quantify that as well. This isn't just about decarbonization. This is about, how that holistically fits in to so many different aspects of our life. Climate change doesn't just impact the sea rise. It then impacts fishing, which then impacts families, which then impacts food. And these are all the ways that it systemically integrates across our lives. And those are all important. And so we want to help you quantify and compare and challenge each other to do more. Okay, I'm going to go back this way. And advocate, obviously action and advocation. So I'm going to turn, would you like to introduce our guests today?
I would love to talk about our guests. So friends, we've talked about the different projects you're going to do. And one of the things, and the whole reason we're gathering today is not just to be inspired on World Environment Day, but it's also to learn about how we can quantify some of the action, how we can take it out of just a learning paradigm and into a measurable action paradigm. And this is where we're honored to work with our friends at Green Planet Energy Analytics. And they are an organization where they help other organizations to measure and to audit sustainable planning. And they are here to work with us today. And we have Megan Foster, who's going to be providing you feedback, some of the work of what you've done, all about calculating the work that the students have done. So Sarah, I'm going to pass it to you and I'm going to step out for a little bit, and I'm looking forward to watching from the other side of the screen. So wonderful seeing you all again, and I will see you soon. And I'm looking forward to hearing your great projects. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. We are very excited to introduce Megan, who is joining us today. Now, Megan has over 13 years of experience working with environmental government and planning organization. She brings expertise in research and data and analysis to her work and plays a key role in supporting renewable energy projects across the Green Planet Energy Analytics. If you guys want to Google it, they do some amazing, cool stuff with, really talking to communities about the impacts that transitioning to renewable resources can make, but also investing in that. And how can that shift your community? What can that bring to your community? And in terms of both climate mitigation, but also in terms of bottom line, in terms of dollars. And so anyways, it's a really cool organization. And you guys should Google it in the background. Megan, back to you. You have a BSc in physical geography from the University of Calgary, and you're joining us today from, I believe, just outside of Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory. So welcome, Megan.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and Terry, thanks for the introduction. I work for Green Planet Energy Analytics. We are happy to be working with the Center for Global Education, and it's wonderful to always join in on these presentations and get to see some people around the world and hear about some of the great things they're doing. So my role with Green Planet Energy Analytics is often looking at the numbers. So we focus on renewable energy and clean energy projects, and we always have an educational component in the work that we do as well. So while we're always trying to advance these green projects for our clients, we always try to make sure that people understand the benefits to what they're doing, what those savings can be. We always try to train the people that we work with, and we always try to bring sort of a student component along with it as well. So if there are some schools in the area, we always try to work with some of those students. We always try to work with teachers and help share some of our learnings through the work that we do. So whether that's really getting to understand some of those clean energy projects and the benefits to, installing renewable technology, understanding the importance of, local food production, energy efficiency projects, behavioral changes to make a difference. But we always like to look at sort of, the bottom line too, which is important for all of us in the projects that we're doing. So not just sort of on the business side of things, but certainly for, any of the changes that we want to do individually, as students, as schools. And so, it's always important to sort of know what we need to ask for or what we need to look at on the lens of these projects, not just because they're important projects. We obviously want to make sure that we're protecting the environment and doing as much as we can. But it's great to be able to say, look, we made a difference, and how did we make a difference? So our role, Green Planet Energy Analytics, and working with Center for Global Education, is to help the students and the teachers with these great schools around the world to understand their measured savings. So, you have maybe already participated in some projects that are impacting the environment in a positive way. We would like to help figure out and help you guys understand how to figure out what that net benefit is to the environment. Did you reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Can we figure out how much that was? Did you save some energy for your school? What is the difference that made? And all learnings are good learnings. If you've done a project and you found out, it actually didn't make a big impact into the, greenhouse gas reduction, but we still feel good about it. And it was still a positive, many other positive outcomes for the school. That still doesn't make it an invalid project. It's just interesting to sort of find out, which ones actually sort of have the most impact to a carbon reduction or a carbon equivalent reduction. And so that's part of the work I'm doing. So I'm looking forward to hearing about some of the projects. The big thing that we're working on is actually to create an interface that will be online. So we're working on it right now, where you'll have access to seeing what everybody else has done in terms of these projects. So whether it's some of our client projects that they've done, you could see, a particular solar project and what were the energy savings and the greenhouse gas reductions that came out of that. And other student projects, from, related peers around the world and what those savings are. And maybe you might want to take on a project that you saw had significant emissions reduction. Or maybe you want to try another project because you found out that, that project actually didn't have as big of impact as we maybe thought it might have at the start. So that's my role. We're looking forward to sort of launching this with Center for Global Education. As we get to that sort of end stage, we will have opportunities to, work with some students, some schools, to have them test some of the online interface tools to actually be able to, you as students and teachers will be able to do some of these calculations yourselves. So it wouldn't require our company to do it. We're actually going to provide you with the tools so you'll be able to do it yourselves and also be able to see some of these case study examples of what others have done.
Amazing. I think this is going to be such a powerful dimension because we've always known that students have the passion and they have amazing ideas. And it makes a difference when to not only your school, but also your own mental health to think, I'm acting. I'm not just listening. I'm not just seeing that people are calling this emergency. I'm acting on it. But now we'll also have the ability to say, not only am I acting, but I'm making a real impact. Or, my project made this much impact, but a project in Brazil made this much. And I think I could do that too. And so being able to compare your stories and your actions and through this technology that Megan's going to be introducing to us to really sort of capture that and quantify it. I think it's such a powerful addition to our already great work that we're doing. So thank you so much for joining us, Megan. I wanted to invite now our friends in Edmonton in Mr. Stewart's class to maybe introduce themselves and I'm going to throw over, and I know that we're just going to get started sharing projects. I want to encourage any of our students. We have, Megan, I don't know if you were here when we were introducing, but we have India, we have Turkey, we have Peru, we have Kenya, and we also have Argentina on the live stream. So we have 6 countries here right now. Well, 7 if you include Canada. I would love to hear from not just our friends in Canada, but all over about what you've been doing, even though I know in Turkey, you're still at home, you're still not back at school, but maybe you have some ideas for when schools open back up, what you'd like to see. And we'd love to help you. We'd like to hear those projects and then help you maybe think of them in different ways as we come to this new energy analytics framework. Does that make sense, Megan?
Yep, that sounds really good. Yep.
Awesome. So Mr. Stewart, is there anyone in your class who would love to come to the front and introduce themselves?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So we've got 2, possibly 3 presentations that students are going to give based on their projects are action projects based on what they are passionate about, and they are looking to take their passions and turn them into projects that are going to be benefiting our local communities, that are scalable up so that we can be impacting larger communities and involving our schools and our local neighboring communities. So our first presentation is going to come from Lakota. Hello, and we'll let her take over. I'll just adjust the camera here.
So my project is micromediation, which is the process of mushrooms absorbing oil out of soil. It's
so sorry, Dakota. It's so great, but as Mr. Stewart's moving, we could only hear his hands on the microphone. So I'm just going to, because I don't have anything, to start again. You're doing so awesome. Over to you.
So my project is micromediation, which is the process of mushrooms absorbing contaminants out of soil so that the soil can go back to more of a neutral balance. So what I have done is we contaminated about a bucket full of soil with oil. We sent it to a testing lab and they actually tested it for us to see. Then I set up this bucket, which is just straw, spawn, contaminated soil, straw, spawn. So it's a lasagna of mushroom stuff. And the reason why I wanted to do this was because my grandma, her boyfriend is a mechanic, so her property is covered in oil. It's not good. It's not growing soil, like it's not growing grass or flowers or anything like that. And I thought this is probably a problem that most people have here because we're an oil place. So I want to get this project, trying it out, so that panicking.
Cool. How many people do you want to get it to?
Oh yes. Okay. So Terry was actually saying that this could be useful for him because he dropped a whole bunch of oil on his property. So I was thinking, hopefully, if this works out, then I can send it to like 2 or 3 people, and they can try to test it out in their area to see if it works. It's going to be a small scale project, but that's all right.
Amazing. What a great place to start. Thanks so much, Dakota. That's so cool. So you said it's like a lasagna.
Yeah, it's a lasagna.
So what were the components of the lasagna again?
It is straw and then spawn, which is just like sawdust with mushroom like spawn in it. And then we contaminate soil, so it's just soil with like oil in it. And then another layer of straw spawn, and then keeps on going.
So I'm going to put this in because of the mass, some of the words for our friends who are non-English language speakers might be a little muffly. So it's straws and then mushrooms and then some oil soil, right? Amazing. So just so everyone's so great. Megan, I'm going to pass it over to you now for your reaction.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I love hearing about the project. I think that, as Mr. Stewart mentioned, this is a very scalable project. So even though you are, doing it in, a size that fits neatly on your desk right now, if this works, obviously this has the potential to impact a community level, a school level, it could obviously go even bigger than that. So very excited to see, and hear some of the results that you find. I love that you had sort of a baseline test done. So if you had sort of that lab test done, so you know what you started with, you contaminated the soil, you had that tested first. Obviously, then you have something to compare to once you can kind of, continue testing. So, from my standpoint, it would be obviously I want to hear, your results, but, as sort of as you watch the timeline, schools ending, pretty soon for Edmonton, you've kind of got less than a month. So just, quickly, can you share what you think, what you're hoping for before school is out for this year, and what maybe some of your preliminary research might have shown that you could maybe expect, or what you're hoping for?
So what I'm hoping for, we actually started this project a few weeks ago. So hopefully by the time school leaves, the mushrooms will come up and the soil will be more neutral. We're actually going to get a test done once the mushrooms come up on the soil to see if the pH balance is more like comfortable for plants to grow in. Other than that, once the testing is done, we're going to try to send out a few kits to a few people around the area to see if they can try to do that at home, to see if it's like more scalable for the community to have.
I love that. And then the one other thing I guess I would ask is if when you sort of set this all up, did you document, how many mushrooms were in the soil ratio, or the, that sort of sawdust ratio that you had put in, and then how much soil you had and how much oil it was contaminated with? Do you have those sorts of measurements in there to sort of help?
Yeah. So we put 2 bags of spawn into the buckets here. We also put, I think it was about 30 grams of oil. 30 grams of oil into a bucket of soil, like probably halfway filled with this. So it's like 40% contaminated, I think it was. 20% contaminated. So okay. It's not the worst contaminated, so we're just kind of trying to see if it will work out just on a small scale.
I think it's great. Yeah, hope it works.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's great.
Okay, so next we're going to head over to Karsten, and I'm going to mute myself because I have to move the camera again so it won't make a lot of noise.
So while they're moving on, Megan, are there, what would be the first step as they're planning a project, and one that they want to use your spreadsheet for, or which will eventually be an app? What are some of the main things they need to be thinking of?
So definitely something to be thinking about is what you started with before you did this project. So if you're looking at, planting trees or growing some local food or making a change, with some other project, what did you start with at the beginning? So we can sort of compare against that, because it's really tough to just, if we only sort of hear some results, to know, okay, but what was it at the beginning? So we actually know what a difference is that you made, because that's what we're trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out your impact. And so that helps us. So in the case of the project we just heard, which is wonderful, they had this lab testing done in advance. And so, it makes it a lot easier for her to then compare to when she has another lab test done, especially because we're talking, numbers here. I mean, these are just scientific laboratory numbers. It's a lot easier to compare a difference and to know if there was actually a change made.
Amazing. Yeah, it's great to think about those, even just little things that you can put down and think I wonder if this will have an impact. Record that information now, and then you can always look back later. Maybe no impact, maybe there will. You never know. It'll surprise you. All right. We're ready for you, James. Or Mr. Stewart.
Karsten, take it away.
My name is Karsten. We locally here, we built a hydroponics unit at home, and I built this unit to bring to school as a test for one unit to design for a school to donate, so that a younger class could start growing food vertically in a classroom and start learning the processes for producing food. So our goal was to get them a unit into the school and then get them to start growing lettuce so that they could see a very fast-paced growth and see how many heads of lettuce they could actually produce as a class. for either them to eat or to be donated in some sense. And the goal is to educate the youth on the production with systems like this and just horticulture in general, to educate them on like growing their own food and working towards smaller scale gardening, which is more community based and more co-op stuff, because these children will be the ones producing our food in the next like 20, 30 years. So it'd be good to have them have understanding of it at a younger age.
Thanks so much. Megan.
So
What's
again,
up?
love to hear these projects. So again, I think, again, when we're trying to decide on the impact and what you're going to measure, this one, you're going to have, you're producing the food. That's obviously an easy one to figure out. So, just keeping track of what's going into it, what sort of energy and time is going in at the front end to actually produce, whatever the quantity and type of food is that you're producing. And then the other piece that we could add in is also thinking about, okay, you've created, a really interesting looking hydroponics system. What went into that? Like how does that differ from maybe, another hydroponics system that you might see? I know in the case of your school, there is another one there, an aquaponics system, but, how does it compare? What materials did you have to source to put together? Would other people be able to replicate this? So that's just sort of another level that could be added on to looking at how we could determine impact. So, in terms of whether this is scalable, would other people be able to create this? Or, is this going to be a tough one for people to source the materials and actually be able to do it? But then we can also look at, okay, how much food did you produce? We obviously have an obvious impact right there, and we can measure that one a lot more easily. So just a couple ideas on that one.
Also, the goal was to use recycled materials. So everything except the pump and the fittings, I actually had at home already.
Wonderful.
So it was about trying to run all the vessels, mainly that you see even on large scale, they use 3-inch PVC. So my goal is to find different bases that could be used as the actual vessel for the water. So a cooler or a pail or just a different kind of container. And then whatever type of vertical PVC they wanted to build onto the unit. Because my goal is to leave the ports separate from the water delivery so it could be changed and they can build to the space that they have access for. So it can be scaled for them.
That's great. And I love that you thought of that and you're already using some, you're reusing materials that might have otherwise just been thrown out and ended up in the landfill. So that's wonderful. And again, because you've done that, it does make it a lot easier for other people to do something similar or to inspire others to come up with what else they could use, as long as you sort of are able to explain, how the system works and the components of it. I think that's great.
And I try to take the kind of like, when building, all of this stuff is like Lego with the PVC, all the fittings come apart. So it's very easy for a person to just fit up an idea that they've had. And if you wanted to change it after, it can still be taken apart because the systems are fairly waterproof without gluing anything. So it leaves options for them to change things up. And some companies have actually looked at modular systems. So you can actually take those pieces and change up. Mr. Stewart has a tower grow in the classroom, and that can be scaled by height because you can take layers off and actually change out the type of layers. So there are companies that are doing it in a lot more like mass-produced scale, but it's still cool to see community gardens where the people do the PVC on the fence or whatever, or use recycled materials to kind of build new planters. And that's always really cool to see.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I definitely see that this could, other students would want to take part in this. And I even know some communities that might be interested in something like this. You've come up with a project idea of growing food, not using traditional soil that others would be able to participate in and sort of have it, not have to purchase, ridiculously expensive equipment and maybe have a hard time sourcing some of that material. I love your project. And I think, if you're tracking, sort of the build design of it, what you did, what components need to be in there, but then also tracking what you're planting, the volume of water, the pump size, that sort of thing, then it's a lot easier to sort of measure, the energy that's going into it, and then, what you're producing out of it as well to sort of have a measurable impact.
The big thing is that a person doesn't have to scale a whole bunch. Like this unit, I'm fitting it with 24 pods. I could easily fit 48 pods on this machine, but it's not necessary for their situation because the pods can be on all 4 sides, but I'm only doing 6 pods per pipe. But you could easily double or triple that depending on what the unit was being used for. So design also goes into what crop is going into it. So it changes based on spacing. So if they're just growing lettuce, then you don't need as many pods as if you were growing like small herbs or different things like that out of the system.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a fantastic project.
Wonderful. And I love the idea that you're reusing stuff. I know that Megan said that too, but it reminds me of other projects that I've heard of that decarbonized students have been doing in their own schools. And that sometimes it's hard to find the materials because we don't have the resources to buy them. But what's available and discarded in your community, your school community, or your local community that you could then reuse and capitalize on. So I know that our school, I think it's in Brazil, they were, Brazil or Colombia, they were collecting pop bottles and using them to melt them down and make them into toothbrushes and then sell them in their community. And I just think that's such an amazing idea of both a shoreline cleanup and then actually using that to build something out that's common and purchased. And so there's this great sort of, yes. And so it reminds me, like, how can we actually use what's available and what's discarded and make it into something new? So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I know that, Mr. Stewart, you might have another student, but I'd love to go to one of our international schools in between as you get set up and ready for that next share. So I'm going to invite our friend Ian in Nairobi, Kenya, to share now with Megan. Ian, over to you.
Okay, so what I'm saying is really similar to what's been said. I feel like you guys were reading my mind. So our school, we haven't been able to do many projects together because of COVID restrictions. Last year for 2 terms, we couldn't be in school. We had to start school this year, so things have still been shaky. So last year I decided to, remember, I'll never forget, I was angry at my biology teacher about something. So I decided to try something that would impress her. So I took paper and tried to grow plants, because papers come from trees, and if we can find a way to take nature that's been made artificial and put it back into nature, that would be really sustainable. So I created an experiment where I would try and see how many crops I could grow. So I used a bean plant, and in the control where I used 10, 9 grew in the regular soil. And in the paper, only 2 of them. But at least now we could have seen there's potential in these creative ways in trying to find a nice and sustainable way working in reverse. So I started to think of other ideas which could work similarly. So in Singapore, they have this system where they burn plastic and they manage to cleanse the air. And then they keep the plastic waste, that plastic ash, in a safe location where it won't harm any crops or anything. So I started thinking, what if you could use the heat that's used in burning that plastic and use it to create energy? So electricity, to generate electricity by heating water. So when I think of finding ways to have maybe a measurable impact, maybe it could be these ways which try and work in reverse using what we've left to make it into something more useful.
That's a really creative project idea, and I haven't heard of one like that before, so I'm actually quite interested to see how that goes. Have you managed to grow anything with the paper yet? Did the beans grow?
Okay, out of the 10, only 2 of them grew. I'm yet to start afresh again and see if there's anything that could be improved. But 2 grew, and that's life, and it worked somehow. So I have hope in any better results in the future.
Absolutely. And again, looking at it from the lens of just trying to, measure, what the energy potential savings or the greenhouse gas potential savings there. And you probably doing this, but, documenting the type of paper you're using. If you're using a paper that might have a bunch of ink on it already, we could be potentially introducing some types of contaminants into the soil. So it's just obviously kind of keeping in mind that paper medium. And then just sort of looking at it from the lens of, okay, what went into it? You said you had to use, multiple sheets of paper, what other elements went into having to, get those 2 bean plants to grow so far? Where was this this particular environment? If you're inside, you're having to have a light obviously used as well, grow light. Were you outside? Those sorts of things, just sort of keeping in mind, and then introducing the other energy as well is a great idea. And that's usually something that, I haven't heard of many students that are doing that, but if you're able to redirect, some heat to produce electricity, obviously just a little bit more detail on that waste heat. And if there's some way we can sort of figure out, how much waste heat is being diverted, because that's obviously going to, greatly increase your measured savings as well. So really interesting project, and it would be great to get some more details on that. And as as these tools kind of get ready, you'd be able to sort of work with those as well. But it's a very unique project that we might have to actually create some sort of custom calculators to be able to understand that measured impact. But really, really interesting project.
Totally. Thank you so much for sharing, Ian. That's wonderful. And then to get another perspective, I know Mr. Stewart-Class, I'm putting you off just once more, but I'd love to be able to hear from our teacher in Peru who's going to share about a project that some younger children are engaged with. Carlos, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I would like to report about a project that in our school is made by the kids who are 8 to 12 years old. And normally these kids, they don't take part in the Decarbonize project because they are for older kids. But the idea of the project is just to look at the mosquito larvae, and according to this kind of larvae, trying to detect which species are. Usually the city in which we are is quite high. Let's see, 1,800 meters above sea level, and and let's see, the weather is dry. So normally we don't have problems with mosquitoes, and the only mosquitoes that larvae that they could find, that was the Culex species, which is this mosquito that they don't let you sleep at night. But outside, that they don't let you sleep at night, and then sometimes they leave you one red spot in somewhere in your body. There's no problem. And we start this monitoring of the mosquitoes since almost 4 years ago. So each year they are different groups of kids doing the monitoring. They just look places in which there are still waters, and then pick up the larvae. We have small microscopes that you put onto the into your cell phone, make the pictures, and we work with the Globe database, in which we report which kind of mosquitoes we have found. And we tried to find another species, so the kids had to took a trip to the jungle, and then they found the other species which we were looking, which was the Aedes and the Anopheles species, which are transmitting also a lot of disease. And they were working normally doing these outdoor activities, looking for mosquitoes, reporting to the Globe database. Last year, with the lockdown, kids couldn't go out. No. So we tried to tell them you have to make a way to breed the mosquitoes. No? They tried, they have little success, but they were always this Culex species. No? And 2 months ago, no, I was talking with some people who says, well, if you have water that just leave, instead that you just throw out, call the kids and they will pick up and they will see if there are some mosquito larvae. And one neighbor had it. The kids came then, pick it up, and they called me late at night. Says, well, we have found the Aedes species. And that is something quite interesting, because we didn't have this Aedes species. and they transmit this disease as dengue, chikungunya, and the thing is that the symptoms for when normal people see people who has the dengue disease, they believe that it's COVID. But of course, doctors know that's different. But anyway, that was quite important, and they were very happy to report it, and then to tell the health authorities, watch out. We have in town this kind of mosquitoes, and they may transmit this kind of disease. And well, they were very happy with this finding, no? And they still are keeping doing this work, no? So that's the our mosquito project.
So that's great, Carlos. Thank you for sharing. So I'm just curious, what are you hoping is the impact to the environment, the potential savings? So it's identifying the mosquitoes they're leading to that particular disease. Is that so? Like, where would be the potential measured impact for the environment by knowing what that is? Obviously, there's an impact in just knowing, which is going to help create the spread of the disease and narrow that down and maybe allow for more targeted, control measures, spraying, whatever. Is there another angle to this project that might benefit the environment?
I would say yes, but it's in the opposite direction. It's because the global warming that have produced the possibility of these mosquitoes here. So it's like a measurement of global warming, indirect measurement from global warming. And we're working in this with this idea. Global warming will produce or bring new disease. And this is also the same for other kind of insects, because we have, for instance, in the highlands, there were some places in when there were no these fruit flies. So people were just planting trees with this kind of fruits, and now their fruits are gone because there are coming these flies. No? So that's the relation that we're trying to bring to the people. No, global warming you cannot measure, but insects can do it. No, let's see.
Absolutely, and that's unfortunate that that's one of the impacts that that's coming out of global warming, and definitely a lot of validity to the work that you're doing, and I think it's fantastic. I don't know if there's much that I can measure in terms of, obviously a greenhouse gas reduction in that case. Maybe something might come out of it as you continue your studies.
But what I think it shows is that interrelation that the apple capture, right? That this isn't just impacting climate change, but this will impact that hunger and no poverty and all those other aspects. That this isn't a silo. Climate change isn't a silo, right? It's the fruit trees, it's the mosquitoes and the fevers and dengue fevers and all the things that precipitate after and around climate impacts. Thank you, Carlos, so much for sharing. I see our friend in Mr. Stewart's class is eager and ready to share with us today. Over to you, Mr. Stewart. Oh, you're still muted there if you're talking. There you
go. Hello, everyone. My name is Ijaz. I use he, him pronouns, and I would like to talk about my action project that talks about how the environment can meet education. So as a student, I feel that I'm not being adequately taught in my classes about education. And I'm living in the global north, so I am actually very privileged to even have education. But also, I would like to know what I can be doing for the environment, because it doesn't matter if you're in the global north or global south, but the earth is warming up. So we need to really do something about that. So my action project is purposed to use a plant wave device, which is a device that converts electrical impulses and biological rhythms by means of electrodes into digital music. This will foster an appreciation for nature and a sustainable form of music, as well as measure the progress of plant growth and the impact of wavelength conversions on plant health. This finds new ways to grow plants more efficiently and understand how plants work at different times of the day, which innovates methods on plant treatment and the efficacy of nature in artificial indoor ecosystems imposed on natural environments and outdoor ecosystems. In other words, analyzing natural growth and their electrical impulses can be an alternative and enjoyable way to study methods on efficient plant growth that can impact food production and unique water requirements and nutrient requirements specific to that organism. So the reason why this project does have importance, especially in my community, is because nature's importance and vastness is severely downplayed in societal means that is often politically and socially driven. So the environmental impact of artificially grown organisms being transferred into natural ecosystems decreases tolerance and natural adaptation skills based on data that I have collected. And if a plant's conditions and requirements can be individually measured, this can help with methods of food production and natural selection, which are either deficient or disrupted due to external factors. So before I do go on, I know I'm not supposed to be taking up too much time, but I do have some sustainable development goals that I do want to relate to this project.
Okay.
So the first one that I can think of is Sustainable Development Goal 2, which is zero hunger. So a facet of this project is to explore efficient natural ways of growing food specific to an organism so that a plant can make as many edible components as possible, especially in less fortunate places of the world once data has been collected here, because I understand that conditions vary based on areas in the world. So this would enforce an amateur method of treating plants specifically to their environment to maximize resources of the plant grown. So good health and well-being, which is Sustainable Development Goal 3, is also part of it, because there is a social justice to this action project as well. Ideally, the music produced by the PlantWave device will be used in school systems to show how beautiful nature is, how beautiful the environment is, why we need to be saving it, and ideally it would be integrated into music education, as well as all facets of education. We can be learning about this in social studies. We can integrate this into our English language arts. Really, I'm looking at integration into our curriculum, because that is really how we can start to educate, which is of course a qualitative aspect. The quantitative aspect is coming later. So that leads to Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is quality education. Again, I really want to start integrating environment into our education so that it can be adequately taught. We are not trying to change anyone's personal beliefs, but it is important that we start to show people like what's happening to the earth, why it's bad, what is good, what is bad, and how we can really start making a change as soon as possible. The next one is goals 11 and 12, so sustainable cities, communities, and responsible consumption and production, which is related to how we would tailor plant growth. This way we can try and minimize water needs, but maximize food yield from plants in order to increase the efficacy of food systems within cities, and also to increase the efficiency of how foods can work. So I do have a few measurable aspects. So by July 2021, I would have collected data from 10 plant species, 5 of which would be plants that can create food. By October 2021, I would use PlantWave music in my band or music programs around North Edmonton, just because that seems more of an efficient goal than going throughout the entire province. And of course, this would have to be an ongoing project because of how vast it is. And by November 2021, I would ideally like to make nature appreciation a big part in school extracurriculars in order to really show how vast projects can truly be.
Well, that's great. You obviously have really thought this project out. You have a lot of different ways that, it's going to, not just impact the environment, but obviously education and socially. So, obviously just, my perspective again of just looking at, your sort of quantifiable results, which you mentioned, just making sure that you're clearly documenting, sort of a baseline without music, and then comparing it to your specific project where you're having it with the different music pulses that we're talking about here, and then what's going in. Obviously we can measure a difference then in terms of potentially the increased production that you're getting, increased yield that could come out of it. Obviously that's something we can more easily measure the impact from, but then also to think about, okay, what has gone into your music, again, without knowing too much about it. It doesn't sound like we're talking a lot of energy going into that, but obviously that is a component now that's being added. So maybe what's being taken away, what other, mediums are being taken away from the plant growth, because you are, introducing something else that that the plants may not necessarily need. So if you're kind of coming up with this sort of new technology, what would the typical plants be needing to grow that, might change because you're introducing something else? And then obviously measuring the success of, sort of a with and without your music. Really interesting though. Yeah. And I appreciate that. Yeah, you need some more time, obviously, to get that. You might have some predictions already, and you can sort of address some of those, the potential of the project as well. That's something to keep in mind. I mean, with any project, what you think, right? If you're going to have a hypothesis, you're going to, you estimate this is what the change might be with, these particular variables, and then you can actually verify that, down the road and see, okay, did I actually achieve that? Maybe I actually was able to achieve more, and I actually needed to use less energy perhaps, or, something else I hadn't factored in. So just those sorts of things to keep in mind. But obviously you're going to have impact in other ways other than just those measured savings too, at the end. So that's great.
Exactly, yes. I am trying to figure out a way to do this project without my end displacement really being really close to how I started. I do want to make a large impact, so I'm trying to assess certain ways I can do this that are beneficial to the environment and do not end up, of course, like using too much energy in the process. And of course, like you mentioned, like the factors that I need to keep into account. And of course, that will take a lot of personal energy, so not really energy per se, but definitely I am taking that into account because of how well-rounded this project has to be. Just because a philosophy surrounding this project is that I want to help the environment, but I also want to make use of what I also have. So this way everyone can benefit from this project in more than just the environmental aspect.
So great. Thank you so much for sharing. What I think one of the key components of Decarbonize, and why it is one of the key components, is that art. And so not all of what we express needs to maybe be immeasurable. Sometimes it's the impact that you have on people that make them reconsider. And that's why we bring art with us to the UN conference, because it's not just about what the students say and what they quantify, but it's how you make people feel, right? And so I would love if you could send us whatever you get, and maybe we can incorporate it into our podcast as something that's going on, a sound or something in the background that adds that emotional call, that emotional plea to people that this is an impact, this is a change. It's not just what you see and quantify, but what you feel. And so thank you so much for sharing that project with us. We are really right on the hour. I can't believe we heard from such amazing projects in Canada, in Peru, in Kenya. We didn't even get a chance to hear from our friends in India or Turkey or Argentina. They're joining us online. But it was an amazing morning. And Megan, thank you so much for introducing us to this new framework. We're going to be sharing it, obviously, with all of our teachers and students through the Decarbonize project. So they'll have an opportunity to work with your spreadsheet or work with their teacher working with the spreadsheet. We'll see how it all comes about. It's all coming together just now. We're piloting it just now. And so we will see how it comes together. But we're so excited to add this new dimension to Decarbonize. It's been going on for 10 years now. It's always exciting when we get new stuff. Now, I'm going to remind everyone that we have our survey link too for something else that we're piloting right now. We want to have a very impactful global youth survey going into COP26. And so this year we're really focusing on these ideas of action and what action means to you. And we have a teacher component. So teachers, you're not getting off this year. This year there's questions that are for you as well. And then we have within the survey itself, we have we're talking about emotions. That's what I was trying to find my word here. So we're talking about not only the idea of climate action, but climate anxiety. And what does climate, all of this impacting us in our daily lives? And how are we learning to adjust to this new reality and hearing the language around us that this is an emergency? And so we are very excited to help you guys sort of quantify this and think about it in different ways. And how is it different maybe in Latvia? Or I saw our friend from Madagascar has joined the meeting as well. And so like, how is it different from Madagascar, from Canada? And we're really interested in looking at all these different dimensions. So we have our friend here. I'm gonna mute you. There we go. So thank you everyone for joining us today. From Canada, from Turkey, from Kenya, from India, from Argentina, from everywhere that we logged in today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will see you online with Decarbonize soon. You'll be hearing from us. Please, if we weren't able to get your project, but you'd like Megan's initial feedback, her thoughts, as you head into this summer, planning and organizing your action projects for the fall, reach out to me. And Megan and I are working closely together to make sure that this is youth focused and that it's tools that you can use. Okay, thanks everyone. Happy World Environment Day. It was wonderful seeing you all today. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye, thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
View so we can see everyone gallery view. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Madagascar. Bye, Turkey. Bye, India.
See you again. Bye.
Hey,
Bye,
sorry,
bye,
Sarah,
Sarah.
I had a meeting.
Nice to see you again.
Nice.